Paul Plummer, came over from Johnson. And he woke our whole group up. We had gotten where we were being cutesy in the meeting. We all had our standard little pitch and all. It was fun. It was nice. It was cutesy. And we all realized the night Paul showed up, we had to really tighten up because this guy was believing every word we said and would do whatever we had said. He would go do it. And there was no time for cutesy. And that's just some of the things I've experienced out of this tradition. What the hell are we doing here and who belongs here? Hard question. Has to be asked every time.
Go to Mike. Go to Mike.
I'm Tom, an alcoholic. I was just wondering what either of your experience or opinion is with groups that are men only, women only. When I first came into AA in New Mexico, where I lived, I heard about a group up at the laboratory, the science lab in Los Alamos, where if you didn't have a security clearance, you couldn't go to that group because they felt they were talking about things that would compromise national security. But people were saying that's not a true AA meeting, and I'm just wondering what your opinion is.
I'm an alcoholic, and if I can't go to your meeting, it's not AA. I think there's a very great need for men's gatherings and women's gatherings and all that, but it's not AA the way I see it. If I can't go, it's not AA.
Like what this pamphlet says, it says these things are possibly beneficial in addition to, but never as a substitute for.
Yeah.
Regular attendance at Alcoholics Anonymous meetings and groups. I think you got the same problem by extension with some of these adjunct fellowships that have formed as a result of Alcoholics Anonymous, young people's conferences and so on and so forth. It's the same problem. Different mask.
Oops. Any other questions?
Got one. Mike, alcoholic. I just got a general question about their traditions and whole. It seems like any of our literature I pick up about our traditions, it has long form, short form. Our big book says that the short form is in the general form of use today, and that the long form is in there for just possible historic value. What's the take on that? What's our general service conference use? What am I supposed to use at my home group? There's, about the third tradition we just talked about. It seems like there may be a little bit of difference. So is there a difference? What's in use, or does it matter?
I go with the group conscience. I think the group conscience ultimately decides what it uses. Now, I'm going to be real honest with you about something. I think that just because GSO does something doesn't necessarily mean it's a good thing. Okay, and we can talk about that later.
Yeah, we will. I'm with you.
And so it's like the old story when the group has a problem. We want to kick Frank out of the group because he lies. And you send them a letter, say, how do you get that done? And they say, well, you're free to do whatever you want. This is our AA experience. That's the kind of response that typically you should get. But I think too many times we, as the group conscience isn't clear. And so we sit out here and we look to the bellwether. And the bellwether, whichever way the wind blowing that year at the conference, but that doesn't make it right. The only way to get at what's right is to decide as a group, and hopefully it's an informed group conscience that comes about as a result of that. I personally like the long form because I think it amplifies better on the underlying principle than the short form does. I think we can get so short we're ineffective.
Charlotte Parmalee said one time, and I'm giving him credit because I have to. Well, he'll hurt me. We did an interesting thing with the big book and with the steps. We took them out of the steps and put them up on the wall so you could see what was going on. And we did the same thing with the traditions. We shortened them up and we put them up on the wall so you could see what they were. So if you want to do this off the wall, do it that way. But if you want to really get to the intent, get into these where the intent is clear. Is it going to kill somebody or help somebody? Whichever form I use. And I'm with Gary, it's up to each group. These are principles of survival, not rules or laws. And if the group doesn't comply with the intent, it'll eventually die. And if it does, it will grow. And GSO is absolutely no help to you because most of them don't understand what this is anyway. That's true.
Oh, hey.
Is it, David?
Let's just go on that.
Nor should they. They're operating a business for us.
Right.
Okay, they're not on the front lines. Why should it have the same perspective? You talk about a tightrope. They're having to field questions and demands from us. Now it's almost 9:30 and we've already got things stirred up in this tiny little room. You can imagine what's going on in New York this morning. Okay. We've been there. There's a lot of prayer goes on. They have a meeting every day just to pray about what are we going to do with the next call.
Any other questions?
My name's Kim. I'm an alcoholic. Sobriety day, June 8th of 1990, and I was. This might digress a little bit, but I'd like to see if maybe we could talk a little bit about bleeding deacons and elder statesmen. My experience in AA is I love AA and I owe service to AA, but I've come into a lot of struggles with power and control in the service structure of Alcoholics Anonymous, and half of me wants to leave and get out of here, but half of me knows I need to stay. So the reason why I'm up here is to see if we can talk a little bit about that and clear the air. In my district, I see a lot of this go on, and I know people that don't have the ability to come here because they feel that they're being either driven away or they're not doing their AA right. So I'd like to talk about that.
Before you leave, let me ask you a question, then we'll discuss that. How do you define a bleeding deacon and an elder statesman?
Somebody who's not willing to give up control to people who are willing to take that control.
Okay.
They are deacon, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I only refer to that in the sense that the way it's described in the literature. Mm-hmm. I guess the other thing I'd like to talk about too is that I found my truth in the literature and not necessarily in the stories. Are great and everything, and there are great stories in the literature. And one book in particular that's helped me through the traditions is AA Comes of Age, because that, for me, that's really how these conflicts came to life. When I saw this being relived in groups today, the same thing over and over again, I began to see that truth. So I just wanted to share that also.
Okay. This whole thing is about the acquisition of power. Lack of power is our dilemma. Our whole purpose is to gain power. That's what it's about. An alcoholic ego with power does really strange things. So our service, from my experience, I see brings out our very best and it brings out our very worst, just by virtue of the fact that there is power here. And people use it. Now, I'm told in the big book precisely why I've been given the power. I've been given the power to help others. But it's very easy to stop. Let's take just an assembly. It's there to serve the groups and the individuals in the groups. Provide them with the services that make 12-step work easier. It's very easy to begin to serve the assembly and to serve the service structure rather than to be the servant. Very easy. It happens so quick you don't even know it's happened. Now, one of the reasons it happens is because we, as members, do not follow the first concept, which is that we are responsible for our own services. You put me in a spot one time where you said, you're now trustee at large. What the hell is that? And I'd been rotated for 2 years as a delegate and hadn't even figured what delegate was yet. So I had to rely upon, if you don't tell me what it is you need, because you gave me this title, I have to do something. I can't just sit back. You've given me a responsibility. I must do something. And if you don't tell me what it is I'm supposed to do, I'll do something. And I really believe it'll be the right thing while I'm doing it. But it probably won't. And I'll get away with that, and there'll be more power, and pretty soon, I mean, you know what I'm talking about. Folks who start groups, old-timers, have a vested interest in that group. They put their blood, sweat, and tears into that. That's their baby. That ain't healthy, but it's real. My group. And then some snot-nosed kid comes along and wants to change it. And my survival's on the line, and my comfort. I've been to groups where I made the mistake of sitting in somebody else's chair. And they let me know about it, too, right now. I'm not in the pecking order. Sit there. That's not healthy, but it's human nature. Okay? The application of true group conscience, informed group conscience, helps us overcome that sometimes. We had a group in the southern part of the state one time that the youngest sobriety in the group was 18 years because they weren't letting anybody new in. And it became a topic at his assembly. It was none of our business, but it became a topic at the assembly. What are we going to do about them? Because every time, particularly a young people's group got started and they moved in and took it over and wiped it out. What are we going to do about them? And old Reed Edgar was very clear. He said, nothing. We'll do nothing about that. It's none of our business. We'll just wait until they all die. Now, that's wisdom. Leave them the hell alone. It's none of our business. We went through a thing at the conference with literature, outside literature in AA groups. Hazleton literature, Concord literature. I'm not in favor of that in an AA group, but it's none of the conference's business. We were trying to come up with some way to force the groups not to do that. We don't even have an opinion. If we understand this, we don't have an opinion on that. The conference is a service agency. It performs no acts of government whatsoever. I can say as an individual, I don't like that, so my group won't do that. Your group want to do that? Okay. I still don't like it, but I have nothing to say about it. The elder statesman, that's the role I've seen them take, and that's the one I try to adopt. But I got to tell you the truth. There's times I'm right, damn it. I've always found the answer is in dialogue. And sometimes dialogue has volume to it. But if we'll talk long enough, we will resolve it. We've got to talk about it over and over and over. And you're right. The stuff we learned when I grew up in AA service, you're still learning again. Damn it, we set it down on paper for you, and you screwed it all up. What's wrong with you? Okay? You don't need to have this problem again.
Right. But we do.
We do.
I'm reminded, too, of something. If I'm new in Alcoholics Anonymous, I didn't get the privilege to sit and watch the elder statesmen hemorrhage their way into humility either. And I think it's kind of I think that's how they all get there. They're human just like they didn't drink any better than us, and so who's to say? Maybe they didn't look so good when they were 5 years sober. And maybe they didn't sound so good either. But, when they get a little time, then all of a sudden they get to sit on the back row, and it's a pretty good deal. So I'm reminded of that. The group I sobered up in Wyoming had 5 members in excess of 30 years. And it was their group. But they were quick to recognize a group project had come along. And they took the time. So I didn't agree with them, and when I didn't agree with them, they were bleeding deacons. But when they dropped the pearls, they were elder statesmen.
At Denver Young People's Group, we were insane. We had gone to Lake Whitney, Texas, and met Marceline White and butterflies. And she gave us all a little butterfly. And we began to drive the north side of Denver old-timers insane. Because we'd come to their meetings in our white buck shoes wearing our little butterflies. And filled with enthusiasm. If you came into our group, you got a little worm. When you finished your fist up, you got a butterfly. And there was that constant conflict until we all sat down and talked with each other and got it down past the buck shoes and past the butterflies and past don't sit in my chair to working it out. And it took some time. My sponsor had the class to go to one of the old timers and ask him to be his sponsor, which put him in a hell of a spot. Now they had to talk. But yeah, it's never going to be any different.
Hi, I'm Lynn. I'm alcoholic. My sobriety date's January 1st, 1989. And two things about that. And one is that when I came into Basalt Friday night, and Bruce was there. And what I saw him demonstrate was that if he felt that traditions were being violated, he had the ability to let the person share, and at the end of that person's sharing, he would say, "My name's Bruce, I'm an alcoholic," and no matter what the topic was, he would say, "And I'd like to speak about whatever tradition," and he would say, "My experience and for me," and he would, and I wish that I had the calmness and patience to be able to do that, and also that's one of the reasons I'm here is the deepening knowledge of traditions and concepts, but. Because I see that when you interrupt somebody and say, that's not AA and we're here to stay sober, and that's not really helpful. But when another group you feel is affecting AA as a whole, or then how do you address that? I mean, there have been, in our district, there have been groups that, and I guess it is their group conscience, that have sex and love addicts sponsoring people. And I mean, it's not the group that's allowing that to happen, but something is derailing in that group, right? Is that when you invite even if it's not your group, but you go to it. I mean, I have a home group, and I only vote in my home group. But I do go to other meetings because my home group meets once a week. Then do you invite the DCM? I mean, it gets sticky.
We've tried that, and it's an absolute disaster. It has never worked. This is what I've learned, right or wrong, at this point. I'm going to help my group stay intact because the others will die. And I just want to make sure there's an intact group available when they do. Beyond that, I tend to go trolling as an individual AA member, and I love those kind of meetings. Because I don't have to say anything against what's going on. I simply speak the truth as I've experienced it. And always one or two people will come and say, "Where do you go to meetings? Where are you getting that?" Beyond that, I don't care because they won't survive. And I no longer have the ego illusion that it's liable to kill somebody. That's an illusion. When I came here, you couldn't have put me in the wrong place when I was ready. And until I'm ready, you can't put me in the right place either.
That's a good bridge question into the next tradition. Notice how I made that little...
Good.
So thanks, Lynn, for bringing that up. Well, I'll just read it for the record here. It says, Tradition 4, with respect to its own affairs, each AA group should be responsible to no other authority than its own conscience. But when its plans concern the welfare of neighboring groups, also those groups ought to be consulted, and no group, regional committee, or individual should ever take any action that might greatly affect AA as a whole without conferring with the trustees of the General Service Board on such issues. Our common welfare is paramount. Well, but let's just go to the questions.
I'm not sure exactly where this... I'm Charlie Schmidt. I'm an alcoholic.
Charlie.
Been sober since 25th January in '88. And I'm sure glad to be here. The thing I'd like to hear some your experience and help and thoughts on is some guidance around the most contentious thing in all the groups in the area where I go to meetings is smoking versus non-smoking. And what I've just heard and actually wrote down is this statement that any meeting where any alcoholic can't go is not an AA meeting. And I've balanced that against making sure it's a place where a person really can fit in. I've struggled with it. I hear people say that it's an outside issue, should never come up, but there are people who wouldn't go to a meeting if there's smoking allowed there because of health reasons. So I've struggled with it a lot, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. Thanks.
Yeah. Is it time for a smoke break yet? Charlie, we solved the problem in our group by making sure we meet in non-smoking facilities, and there's no hassle over it. I do believe there are meetings I can't go to. But then there's so many meetings I can't get to all of them anyway. And each group, that's group business is group business. What's our format going to be? That's group business. It's nobody else's business. Smoking and non-smoking. That's group business. Nobody else's business. If I don't like it or if I can't go, I don't go. If you're a smoker and can't stand not smoking for an hour, don't come to our meeting. Or come and go on out. We don't care if you go out for a smoke. We don't care. But group business is group business. Do we or do we not pass the kitty? We're going to find, sometimes we don't pass the kitty. When we get into the seventh tradition, I'll go over some of the reasons that we haven't at all times. What's the purpose of it? So you got format. Where are we going to meet? How are we going to meet? When are we going to meet? That's all group business. Who carries the key? Denver Young People's Group didn't have a meeting one night because the person with the key didn't show up. So what we did at that point was give everybody a key. Solved that. Then we ran into the problem. The church we were meeting in said, we're really not too keen on that idea. We'd rather not do that. So we had to have a little structure come about so that there was more than one person but not the whole bunch, and we had to negotiate. But that's group business. Okay. Who gets to come? Whoever wants. How do they have to dress? However they want. We had occasion one time where a very sick person came and they didn't bathe in between meetings. It really got pretty rank. Well, some people were delegated who were kind and loving and helped them find out about bathing. But not before some of us in that group thought we ought to just tell them not to come. You got to go through the whole mean-spirited thing before you get to the truth sometimes. If it offends you, I'm pretty patient. If it offends me, I have no patience. Solve it, damn it.
Okay.
Oh, we're not through with that, are we?
Oh, yeah, let's get done. No.
One of the things that's going to occur here, we're going to begin to see how these all interrelate. They're not going to isolate them, but they interrelate. Does what we just talked about connect with unity? Okay. If I try to tell your group about smoking, it creates friction, not unity. If I say whatever you want, but I can't come, there's still unity. Maybe we can meet on another common ground. So it fits for me. I can understand it if I can hook it to promoting unity. What I have to be careful of is not to tell you, don't go to her group because they smoke. That's divisive. And I'm really good at that.
One thing, too, all of this, the stuff that we've been talking about, at least in these first 4 traditions and probably for the next one, is maybe some guidelines on how to be the best job in AA, and that's an AA member. And believe me, I think it's something innate and fundamental to us that we just can't hardly stand at. We got to be in there creating friction, controversy, bringing disharmony, disunity, being right, as opposed to being sane. And so on and so forth. And I found, I'm not a team player. I am not a team player. I played high school football. And the only reason I played was to get my name in the paper. And I got it in the paper. And then later on I got my name in the paper when I didn't want it in there. And I think that, talking a little bit ahead, but talking about committees. Committee system is really a piss poor way to do things in AA. But it's the best we got. And it calls into question our own defects. We're not committee players. Nobody's committee people in here. We're committees of one. And so all these principles just run so contrary to what we just know is best for the world that it gets almost overwhelming at times. I think I talked last time about going to a group in Louisiana saying, "Where's AA?" That's hardly good openers. It's not good that you just do not. You're not I'm not bringing any harmony into the situation when I do that. I did get eyebrows up, but sometimes I do things like that just for shock value, just like, "Hey, wake up," And I don't think that that's necessarily the smart thing to do, but I'm not well. So I want to believe I'm getting a little better. So why is it that the non-smoker comes to the smoking meeting, likes the meeting, and says, "Let's make this thing non-smoker"? Conversely, why is it the smoker goes to the non-smoking's meeting and says, "Where's AA?" See? It's equally contentious, equally divisive. Why can't we just leave people alone? And subscribe to the deal if we like it, and if we don't, go start our own group. And then we'll find out what it takes to keep a group going versus just starting one.
Bill told some wonderful things about the formation of these traditions. These aren't intellectual things. These were hammered out by making mistakes. And the membership requirement thing, at the time he was trying to, as the groups began to grow, he wanted to get an idea of what are some of the general things that we all do so we can all be members. And he ran into a group in St. Louis, the Wilson Group, which right off the bat was a problem because he'd asked people, "Don't call it Wilson Group." Well, they're Wilson Group. To be a member, there were 53 rules. First of all, you had to have a diagnosis from a doctor that you were alcoholic. You had to have a note from the doctor. And a real sponsor in the old-fashioned form. One of the members had to bring you. You couldn't just come. They've been with you to the doctor, and they've done their 12-step work, and they bring you. Now, they're responsible for you. That's one of the rules. If you miss one meeting, you got to go before what they call a crash committee, which is a committee of old-timers to decide whether you're going to be allowed to stay or not. Did you really mean business or not? And you and your sponsor had to show up there with a note as to why you were not there. And if you missed 2 meetings or drank, you were out. You didn't get to come back. And there were all kinds of those things. So Bill decided, we better find out. So he wrote all the existing groups at the time, "Send us your membership rules, please." And when they were all compiled, nobody could belong to AA. Nobody. If we put them all together, we're all out. And so we came up with the idea that alcoholism's sufficient. Okay, that's the only membership requirement. God, I got excluded so often.
All right.
Read that history. Another good one. You mentioned AA comes of age. Don't miss Dr. Bob and the good old timers. You had a question, Jim.
Alcoholic named Jim. Sobriety dates November 3rd, 1991. And this one, it's experience you had. This kind of touches back on what Kim was talking about. If you're got a community, I'm not speaking about any place in particular, I've seen this in several areas that I've been in, where the personality of one or two individuals or one or two groups really tends to dominate AA in that community. And I've seen it be good in bringing up the standard of AA, and also in some areas of really keeping things kind of repressed. Not, I think that there was any ill intention, but just get a big meeting, with a lot of energy, and next thing you know, they're running the whole district. And just as far as some approaches on how to address that. Again, it's either as a group or with some individuals that may approach, that may come up along those lines.
My group ignores them. I know what you're talking about, but the lovely thing here is that each group is autonomous, and if that's going on, I don't have to participate in it. Sometimes it's fun to participate in it. There's nothing like being the token at a meeting where you really don't belong. But those things they run their course. For me, generally, when I don't like what's going on, it's because I'm not running it. Get down to the truth of it. I wish I'd have thought of that.
Why don't we take about 10 minutes here and everybody get refreshed on the coffee and some of us will go burn them? We got a couple of questions related to how this might apply to the family with respect to tradition, maybe 4. My out is my wife's here. You can have lunch with her. No, but seriously, it gets down to a situation of autonomy. We got to discuss the fact that my wife and I we are the first people that we see in the morning and the last ones we see at night, and everything that happens in between is anybody's guess. And sometimes our lives get pretty full and pretty busy, and if you're active, particularly in Alcoholics Anonymous, you're not going to be able to run your life. So there's a lot that can happen. There's a lot of stress and strain that goes on in there. But bottom line, I think my individual actions and my wife's individual actions affect the unity of our little unit, okay, our little family unit. And so we always have to have that means of, it's called communication, and I never met a drunk yet that was any good at it. I communicated before with my fist, usually. And then I got reciprocated, and that was communication. And so the whole thing in sobriety has been a learning experience for me to learn how to communicate, what's going on, and to not lose sight of the primary purpose of the exercise. Is that, like Don said, we're going to grow old together. And there's so much stress and strain out there. There's so much external influence to if nothing else, buy stuff, and conform to some mainstream idea of what a marriage or a partnership ought to be. But we have within ourselves and within our collective selves and within our unit some things that we've accepted, and one of them is that our marriage isn't normal because our lifestyles aren't normal, because our activity level in AA is pretty high, and by any outside external view, we are nuts. We're crazy. So we don't live what you would call it in a conventional manner. And, that had to get okay with us. We had to make some peace with that. And so by exercise of this principle of autonomy, really there's no rules. And we're free to decide how it's going to be. So, I don't know. I hope that helps. I'm sure Don has some thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, we've been married 23 years now without a fight, and it's primarily because we really do live this way. Let me expand that a little bit. With respect to our own affairs, it's nobody else's business in our home. We have a couple different groups that exist in our home. We have a marriage between she and I. That's separate from the unity that takes place, she and I and the children, which is separate from one that takes place between she and I and the children and the grandchildren. We interact differently there. Now, what happens between she and I is our business. It's none of the children's business what happens between she and I, unless we slop it over. One of the ways we practice that is that everybody in our house has their own room and it has a door on it. And once that door is shut, you will not be bothered. My grandson and I both love Mozart. As the girls grew up, they liked noise. Now, I don't want to stop that from happening, but the idea is that it gets discussed thoroughly. Let's keep the volumes where it won't intrude. That's all. You want to play the stuff I grew up on and had to walk away from? Get some earphones, or close the door and keep the volume down. The two girls, I don't know if you've ever raised girls, but they're a different deal. I thought I knew mean. I've been in penitentiaries and I haven't seen that kind of mean. I've got some funny stories I won't tell now about all that, but the upshot of it was, if you're gonna talk to each other that way and treat each other that way, please don't do it around me because it hurts me. So they don't. I'm sure they haven't stopped doing it. They just quit doing it around me. I'm a pattern of petter, and I'm in the process of seducing my wife 24 hours a day. The picnic's fun, but getting there is more fun. Well, it is, Tom. I'm a demonstrative person. And so my kids grew up understanding that. They also grew up understanding that when our door shuts, it's none of their business what goes on in there. Absolutely none of their business. We can watch TV, we can sleep, we can do whatever. The children are allowed to knock on the door in a crisis. And that's all. Okay? Otherwise, no command. Same goes for their rooms. I won't do that unless there's danger involved. Our group conscience is determined that because I can see in the dark, well, they believe that. What it really is that I know where everything in the house is. So I can move about in the dark and not bump into things. So the deal with conscience is if there are intruders, they're my job. Because I've told them that. In my house, in the dark, I have an advantage. I know where everything is, and I can move like a cat, and I can see in the dark. And the intruder can't. Your job is, don't leave anything on the stairs that I don't know about. So okay. Like he says, we're crazy, but it works. Okay. Whether we have cookies and broccoli for breakfast or whatever we eat, that's our business in our home. It's none of the neighbor's business. But I have to expand this to the fact that I now live in a neighborhood. I had no idea how to live in a neighborhood with sane, reasonable people. It just wasn't. I'm a traveler. And when you finally piss the neighbors off enough, leave. Or when they get too close, leave. God, don't get friendly with them. They might want you to do something with them. Well, that's where I came from. But I want to be a good neighbor. I really do. I'm genuinely interested in being a member of my community and having my family a member of the community. And I've told you I listen and I watch because that's how you learn. Trash day is the day I put the trash on the street. I had to learn that. Because it's my inclination is when it's full, put it down there. 4 or 5 days, so let the dogs have it. Who cares? No. In my neighborhood, we put it down the same morning he's going to get it. Okay? Because collecting the trash is our business as long as it's in our garage. When it affects the rest of the groups in my neighborhood, I need to consult with them. And I didn't ask my neighbors what day you want me to put the trash out. I watched what day they put it out. And did it. You all live in Colorado. You know this time of year we have a snowstorm and then it melts. And before it's all melted, it freezes at night, so the gutters fill up with ice. And they make dams. And so you got a mess out in front of your house. I was bitching and moaning about that to my wife one day. It's one of my better things. When's the city going to get by and clean that ice up? And I heard this noise outside, ka-chunk, ka-chunk, ka-chunk. And I looked out, and my next door neighbor is out there with an ice, looks like a little hoe, chopping ice. I got it. I got my little old shovel and went out and joined him, chopping the ice. Got to know my neighbor that way. I believe that good fences make good neighbors. It's my heritage. It's true. And the best fence I know of is a privet hedge. So I put in hedges when we moved in out there between myself and the two neighbors and one down the front. Because that would affect them. And because one of the things I was learning about being in the neighborhood is that my neighbor watches my house. He watches the whole neighborhood for intruders. He really belongs there. It's his neighborhood, and he doesn't want strangers. He wants to know what the hell they're up to. So I finally asked him, how high would you like these hedges? And how would you like them trimmed on your side? They're my hedges, but half of them face his side. And we discussed that. It's a wonderful thing. It didn't solve any problems. It didn't get anybody sober. It wasn't world crashing. But it made me a better neighbor. My activities affect them. I had a disaster with the hedges one time. I was in North Carolina working down there, so I went home to trim the hedges. And the city came by and told my wife one day, they're just way too high. Here's how high they can be. And she had to trim them down. And my next visit was not all that happy. Well, unhappy, but I heard about that. What I'm trying to say is that these things really do apply in the way I live inside that home and outside that home, in my neighborhood. I just look at every neighbor as another group. The Clampets just moved from next door from us. Well, I'm sorry, but for 2 years I let their hedges grow high. Had a big black lab that they cleaned up after once a month or once every 2 months. And I got kids in my backyard, and there's all this going on. And trying to negotiate with them was impossible. It was impossible. They wouldn't negotiate. So, we just let the hedges grow. And ignored them, and they moved out last week. So, it works.